Hi everyone. Today I want to tune in and talk about my process of shadow work and how it is related to the process of harvest as we are in our harvest season right now. So, let me tell you a little bit about what shadow work is. It's a huge part of my practice, and there are many different ways of doing it. And essentially, the goal is, even the goal is different for some people, so I'll just express how it is for me. The goal of my shadow work is to befriend and care for the parts of myself that are hidden or made to feel wrong or bad. So, this intersects, like much of witchcraft does, with things like psychology and philosophy and art and expression. And so, because of the ways that it manifests itself in our everyday life, I find it really important in my magical practice to combine those sort of earthy, third dimensional, physical manifestations of shadow work into a practice that works for me. So that's kind of my invitation to you, if you don't have a practice for shadow work yet, is maybe to try actually creating a process for yourself so that you can engage in shadow work. Excuse me. So, even just talking about shadow work kind of gets me a little emotional. So, how do you know when you need to do shadow work? Who's to say? Generally, because shadow work's a big part of my practice now, I can normally pretty quickly be like, oh, I need to do some shadow work around this, which means I need to find out why I'm doing this, and I need to care for the part of me that thinks it's okay. And so this that I'm talking about is normally behavior that doesn't really align with my truth. You know, sometimes we take actions that we're not really proud of, or we say things we wish we hadn't said, or we do things that we know we shouldn't do. And, those shouldn'ts and shoulds are very slippery. But I will say that for myself, using the gauge of kind of like, how do I want to show up in the world? As my sense of morals really works well for me because I have a lot of integrity naturally, and I want to do and be the best naturally. But it can be hard to know what the best is. And without a lot of good information about what is best or what is right, because what is best and what is right differs from every person, we can be left in places of ambiguity a lot. And it can create situations where the space is liminal and the line between right and wrong doesn't seem super physical. And because that line is not physical and not clear to us, our shadow is able to manifest in those places. And we often, as human beings, I'll speak for myself rather, I'll take ownership. I say we, I mean me and my many selves. I often feel as if I ignore the line. Sometimes I invite myself into shadow work without really realizing it. But then I'm given the blessing, the opportunity to witness that I have made a mistake and that the action that I took doesn't align with my truth, or what I said doesn't align with my truth of how I want to show up in the world and how I want to be with people. And also the key here for me is I do want to be kind to people that have wronged me. And I do want to show up with integrity even when other people are not. And it took me a lot of shadow work to get to that point. But that's how I know if something aligns with my truth, is that it's meeting a set of standards that I have developed through shadow work to determine who I really am and who I really want to be. I don't think I'd be anywhere without this shit. And also, it's all made up, so whatever. So the first thing that I do is I see or I notice a behavior. And that behavior is normally based on a sense of lack. I'm lacking something. So I kind of wish I thought of an example behavior, but I kind of don't want to out myself by admitting that I have flaws because I'm a Virgo. The first thing that comes to mind is probably something around communication. So let's say, what's like a conflict I've been in with people? I'll just use a casual example. Like, let's say that I'm at work and there were so many deep examples available to me, but I'm just not in the right headspace energetically. I cannot go that deep right now. Let's say we're at work and, you know, I offer to take on this project. I'm really passionate about it. It aligns with my need for creativity, and so I jump at the opportunity. And then the deadline approaches. I haven't worked on it at all, and I don't feel good about that. And now I'm in a situation where I might want to do some shadow work because the behavior that I noticed was that I didn't do what I wanted to do, which was this project. Or that's normally where mine begins, is feeling bad about myself. But it could also be you don't do the project, you make excuses for why you didn't do it, and then when you're approached about it on the day of the deadline, you lash out at your boss or coworker. Or you call in sick and don't even show up for it and have like an avoidance around it. Or, you know, you create a lot of sadness and drama around not having done it. Like, oh, I wish I did it. I just had so much going on, and like all of these things happen, and all of this stuff kind of comes up at the end of the thing, which are like, these are your indicators that you may have done something you didn't want to do or failed to do something you wanted to do. And now you have a lot of evidence to look at that proves that, and that can be really triggering. And it's like, whoops, I have a flaw, I did something wrong, and you get to decide how you show up in that. You can show up in any of the ways that I listed and be done. You can lash out at your coworkers, you can make a lot of excuses, you can get really dramatic and sad about it, you can do all of those things. And maybe the pattern won't continue. Maybe that situation won't exist ever again. But if it does, you may have wished that you had done a little shadow work around why you didn't complete the project and why you lashed out. And so, like most things, the first step is to admit that you are wrong and that you did something that you weren't proud of. It can help to admit that to the people that were also affected by it. That can help sometimes. Sometimes it's not necessary. Sometimes we have to do shadow work first before we can even admit to people that were harmed by our action or inaction that didn't align with our truth. Because if we are still really activated and triggered around it, no admission of responsibility and no apology is going to sound real great or feel real good sometimes. It really just depends. Choose your own adventure. So once you notice the behavior, now you have the option to either immediately start like making amends with the people that you harmed if you want. I don't always want. And then you get to yank up and pull out and examine the reasons that that behavior occurred. So why didn't I do this project even though I really wanted to? And why did I react in the way I did when I was confronted about it? And so the reasons can be things like, I really wanted to be seen in my creativity, but as I was doing the project, I wasn't getting a lot of validation, and I was feeling as if my daily tasks were really important to my coworkers and my boss, but I wanted the project to be really important to my coworkers and my boss, and I didn't feel seen in that, and I didn't know how to ask for that. Which is just an example I'm making up. Definitely not something that I've gone through. I'm sure it's something I've gone through. And this is where the harvest analogy is really useful for me. This is the part where we are tilling the soil and we are digging it up and we're breaking up the roots of weeds, and I'm starting to create space in the soil to air it out, create a fertile soil. That's what the tilling is doing. And it's painful. It hurts because I am the human and I am the shoveler and the tiller, but I am also the earth. I am connected to the earth. I'm a human being. And as we know from the history that's being revealed to us, disrupting land is hard on us. And all of those cycles in our history and in nature are mirrors for what is going on inside of us. As within, so without, as above, so below, right? So tilling the soil fucking hurts, but it's also healing the earth and creating a fertile earth. It's global work. It's necessary. And then once you do that, you get to plant new seeds. So let's talk about tilling the soil a little more, because the way I said it, it kind of sounds like beating yourself up. That's really not what it is. Sometimes it is, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. It can also look like processing, which I go through phases of beating myself up when I'm processing, but eventually I kind of get out of that. What helps me get out of that is therapy, traditional therapy, engaging in healing modalities, and having a community of people that listen to me around, you know what I mean? And that I listen to when they need help. We have a reciprocal listening relationship. And things like journaling, reading my tarot cards, praying to my ancestors for strength and help and guidance, asking for help from my friends and people in my network around me, asking for help from my higher self. That's all part of tilling the soil too. Because if we engage in shadow work only in the spiritual dimension, it will not do anything on this earth. It just won't. So if you're not doing any actual processing, if you're not going to therapy, if you're not journaling, if you're not seeking any kind of healing for your human self, somatic healing is really powerful for this time. Think about the dirt. Think about moving the dirt, right? You don't get stabbed as much if you, the earth, can be moving. So that's kind of something that just came to me that is really powerful and beneficial. So find whatever healing modality works for you. Find your way to dance, speak, create, be seen, and see others. Like, that tilling the soil part is really important. And it feels a little painful. Shadow work's hard. So now I feel complete on the soil part. And so now we plant the seed. So planting the seed can look like a lot of stuff. I've noticed when I think about planting the seed, what I'm thinking about is, I just changed my whole idea about what this thing is. I thought that there were a lot of external circumstances affecting me because I couldn't do this project, and I thought that there were a lot of external reasons I wasn't doing it, but it turns out a lot of the reasons I didn't do the project are actually inside of me. And so I changed my mind about that, and now I have to learn a new idea about who I am and how I show up in the world so that I can plant a seed and create something new from that hard work of realizing that I wasn't at my best. I get a lot of these seeds a lot of places. Some of them come from divine downloads. Some of them come from my therapist. Huge advocate for having a therapist during this time. Even though my therapist isn't spiritual, I am able to process the thing that's going on with me, and then they give me a new seed, like a new idea about how to think about that thing, because they're, knowledgeable in psychology, psychology is a huge part of shadow work. It's a way that shadow work manifests in the third dimension. So if I want my shadow work to exist not just in the spirit world but also in this world, then the work I do in this world is going to be, messages from my therapist. Sometimes I'll follow a new hashtag on Instagram, like, creativity, or hashtag hustle, or hashtag entrepreneurship, or if I want to start my own business now because I have this realization, then I'll find a bunch of people that have a similar business and follow them so I can see what they're up to. I also have the option to ask my friends and support network of educators, which, these are just people in my life that I've created a support network because I had to through my shadow work. And I know that that's not available to everyone for sure. So sometimes I'll go online and I'll just watch videos about the thing that I'm struggling with. So all of those things are opportunities for me to invite a new idea into my mind and into my fertile soil, because I have uprooted that situation and now I'm welcoming in a new one, which is the seed. Lovely. And then comes a really difficult part for me as well. This is all very difficult. Probably the easiest part is putting the seeds in the fertile soil, but then you have to wait for the seeds to grow. And during that time, I still get triggered. It doesn't stop me from being sensitive about it. And it doesn't necessarily completely halt all of the behavior that I was unhappy with. Often, I'm invited to engage in that behavior that I'm unhappy with over and over and over again for an entire season, or until the cycle is over. And so that season where I just uprooted whatever, hurt was creating this behavior, and then I planted a new seed, and now I'm waiting for it to grow, and the bullshit's still coming at me. That's the fertilizer. It's like, that's the thing that you compost. The fertilizer is alchemical. It's alchemy. So it's really about taking the things that other people put on you that are inviting you out of your integrity and turning them into something that you can feel like you are in your integrity with. But you'll still be invited out of your integrity, and you won't be correct 100% of the time. Because the other part about this shadow work is not only do you learn the new idea, but you have to practice being and embodying the new idea. So if I know now that the reason I was being really rude to my coworkers is because I want to be seen for my creativity, I don't have to act on that. I can do nothing about that. And I can still be a fine, whole, perfect human. And it doesn't affect my worth. I don't have to strive for greatness or strive for perfection. I can even just say to my boss and my coworkers, like, I didn't really feel seen in my creativity, and so it caused me to mess up, and I'm really sorry. That apology can be the work. But if I find that this situation is kind of occurring again and again and again, and now that the thing happened and I have some new ideas about it, I'm still seeing that there are quite a few situations in my life where I don't really I'm not seen for my creativity. Like, I have relationships in my life where I'm not seen for my creativity. I have habits in my life that sabotage my creative expression. I have self-talk. I have all of this stuff that really needs to be cleared out and examined during this time in order for me to grow. And this is the experience of the seed pushing out of the soil and going through the worms and the fertilizer and the bullshit. And at the end is sunlight. So if you're following the light and you're following the warmth, ascension is not to heaven in this metaphor. Ascension is just so that you can feel the sun, because the sun, the infinite source, will feed you from there. If you can get out of your trauma responses and you can get out of the bullshit and you can use your strength that is inherent in your seed nature that was given to you by your DNA and is your birthright spiritually and in the cosmos, if you use that potential to grow out of the soil during your cycle of shadow work, you will reach the sun. Unless the seed's upside down, which means you learned something wrong. You got a bad idea instead of good ones. Oh, the rain here is really lovely. Watering all our seeds. And here we are on the fall equinox. I could talk about that. Another video. So now you saw the sun. It must be over. It's not over. That's not the end of the shadow work. Now you have a lot of fruits of your labor. Zhoof. Vegetables of your labor. Let's say it's a bunch of corn. Yum. I love maize. Nom, nom, nom. And harvest is good. Bounty is good. Abundance is good. Those are things that we associate with wholeness and security. So we might want to believe that now that we're harvesting, it's the end. But an important part of harvesting is separating the wheat from the chaff. And not every crop in the land that grows forth is going to be delicious and whole and ready to eat. That's just not true. Not everything that comes from your shadow work is going to be good. You can still do wrong. You can still mess up. And when you are harvesting, and especially remember this now, because it is the fall equinox and it is time to harvest. Harvest does not mean going through and putting every single vegetable in your basket. If you put every single vegetable in your basket, you'll bite into some rotten corn. It is a time of discernment and selection. And ideally, the information that you have learned along the way will make it easy for you. It won't be very difficult to say, yeah, I don't actually want this anymore. Like, I understand a little more now, and so I'm ready to throw away the stuff that isn't for me and that won't nourish me, because not everything can nourish me. Not everything that I want is good. Our desire and our will are different for a reason. So that's how I think about shadow work. It helps me to remain present and in tune. Sometimes I will disassociate, and what I recommend is the more conscious you can stay during the tilling of the soil part, the easier the rest has been for me. I like most of the time. But there's also, after we plant the seed and things are growing, we're exhausted. So if I'm not present for the beginning of this, I might find later that, I tilled soil and I planted a new idea, but I wasn't conscious for it. And now I'm trying to grow and I'm too tired. Like, I'm exhausted. I'm not getting the nourishment that I need. So I need to seek out more community and more self-care and more help from my ancestors, more prayer and meditation and body movement so that I can have the nourishment I need in order to grow. That's something that I struggle with just because I disassociate sometimes, so maybe that'll be useful for you. And I hope that you have a bountiful harvest and that most of the things that come for your shadow work are for you and nourish you. and that you get lots of water and rain, as much as you need. I'm sending you lots of love.